Christian parenting.
Hey parents, are you looking for simple, meaningful ways to help your kids know, love, and follow Jesus? Well, the Christian Parenting Store has exactly what you need, from scripture affirmation cards and devotionals for kids to prayer journals and customizable prayer cards. Every resource is designed with your family in mind. These tools really do make it easier to weave faith into your everyday life and give your kids a strong foundation in Christ. One of the things I don't want you to miss are simplified guides. And what these are digital guides that have all the resources you need to learn about some tricky topics. So let's say discipleship, identity, technology, politics. We pull all together the best voices in the Christian Parenting Network, and we put everything by topic into one guide. And here's why I love this. When I was a young parent, I kind of wanted a script. I'm like, I feel just nervous. I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I don't even know what I'm talking about. And I think these guides can help you just with the starting point to say, what does the Bible say about this? What are other parenting people saying about this, and then go from there in much prayer with how you need to proceed with your own kids. But if you're looking to help your kids strengthen their own relationship with the Lord and start building good faith habits, check out some of those devotionals. There are so many different options in there that your kids will love. And here's the best part. Every time you make a purchase within Christian Parenting, it helps us continue to create incredible resources for families like yours. So make sure you head on over to cpgive.org to check out all the wonderful resources available. And again, get your family faith resources at cpgive.org. Hey friends, welcome back to Pardon the Mess. I'm your host, Courtney DeFeo, and I'm so pumped about today's episode with Melanie Shankle. But before we get to that, I need to give you some advice. We've talked about photos before and how they can take over your life. And there's like 70,000 digital photos and no one's organized, or maybe it's just me. But one thing I realized as I was kind of getting pictures together for Ella's senior year, they asked for ones from different stages of her life. And I'm like, I have 1 billion photos of Ella and Larson together. I don't have a ton of just Ella. And so here's my plea. If you've got little kids, make your family do family photos. And you don't have to have a professional. Just grab one of your friends, maybe at Christmas time or around their birthdays, and make yourself take pictures of them in a decent outfit. And it can be on the iPhone, but what you need to do is take a picture of each kid by themselves, and then make sure you get in the pictures. There's so many I didn't get into that I thought I looked bad or whatever, but you'll look back and be so glad at each season of your life you had a rhythm or a habit of taking pictures of the family once a year at least. And more is great, but make sure you get them alone. Okay, free advice on Pardon the Mess. Today's episode is with Melanie Shankle. And if you don't know her, you've got to just go read her stuff and listen to her podcast. She's on the Big Boo podcast with Sophie, and we've had Sophie on here before, but I've been reading Melanie's books since like the blogging days. Like, she's one of those people that makes you laugh out loud, and then all of a sudden you're crying because she brings like the craziest, awesome story about faith or parenting or friendships or the church. And she's just so fun. And so this will be no different today. We are talking about her newest book called Here Be Dragons, which has just come out, treading the deep waters of motherhood, mean girls, and generational trauma, and how those all work together as she really talks about her past and some of the wounds that she had with her late mother, and then talks about a story that her daughter went through about a really tough mean girl season, and talks about generational trauma. And I know this is pretty heavy, but if you're a woman in general and you've had a mom in general, this is going to be helpful to you. But if you have a daughter, this is especially helpful to kind of pause and go, what did I bring into my motherhood? I didn't deal with my junk or my trauma, or didn't have therapy. And some of this is rubbing off on my girls. And before we get like down in the dumps and harder on ourselves, let's just get honest about it and say, is there another way? And so I think Melanie's encouragement today will show you that there is another way. And we need to have the courage to just pause and think about, oh man, do I want that same upbringing for my kids? And some things you bring into motherhood are great. You bring things that are awesome from your past, and some things you bring in that you don't want to repeat. And so enjoy this chat. Super, super practical, super profound. And I think you'll love Melanie as much as I do. Here we go.
Melanie Shankle, I'm so excited about today. Before we get into some really, really important stuff, I know this is a wound, but can we talk about the A&M Auburn game?
Listen, we can talk about it. It was fine. You know,
Here's the thing. I went to that game with Sophie and our friend Ella, who's like her daughter, and then Ella's parents, and Caroline came and the whole thing. We had a great time. We loved Auburn. It is truly the loveliest village on the plain.
Yes, it is.
I loved everything about it. It was so great. Caroline was like, maybe I want to go to grad school at Auburn. Like, we fell in love with it. But I knew all day long. I was like, we're going to lose this game. I was like, it's
really?
Jordan.
I thought we were going to get killed.
No,
Okay.
I kept telling all the Auburn people, and they were like, no, we're terrible. And I was like, no, but you don't understand. I've been an Aggie for 30 years.
This is where the wheels fall off.
This is what happens. We have everything to play for. It's all up to us. And what we're going to do is come in and lose this game. And when y'all scored on the opening drive, I looked at Sophie and said, we're going to lose. I said, like, if we don't score on this next drive, we're losing. And we didn't. And we lost.
You know, I remember growing up, like, there'd be like big games, no matter if it's NFL or whatever. And my mom is so sweet. Like, if the kicker at the last thing mess up the game, she's like, I just feel so sorry for that Alabama boy or whatever. And I'm like, Mom, but I thought about you during the game. I was like,
that's
Melanie's
nice.
somewhere in this town feeling really frustrated.
Yeah, I was. But it was
Lord.
fine. Listen, because what happens is, Courtney, is you just get to a place of acceptance where you're like, this is what it is. And like, I even had somebody message me a couple of weeks ago and they were like, can you do this thing like in fall of 2025? And I was like, sure. And they were like, do you want to wait for the football schedule? And I said, no, that's where I am now. Doesn't matter.
It's amazing.
Doesn't matter.
I love that I can hear Piper hobbling.
I'm so sorry. They're so keyed up right now.
That's life. That's
I'm
life.
hoping they'll settle down.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, what's bugging you these days? I think y'all call it on Big and Boo, Cass. I think you call it hard nose.
Hard nose.
Anything bugging you that you're like, it's a hard no for? I've got one for you. There's a fly in my house, like a really loud, aggressive. And when we're recording this, it's December. I'm like, it's freezing outside. There's no like sweaty Texas going on. Like, why are you in my house?
Yeah, no,
hard no
I get
on flies.
How hard no. Okay, I had one. Okay, this happened yesterday. So I'm having some work in the house, just some different stuff redone. And we had a handyman here yesterday. Listen, sweet guy. I appreciate it, whatever. But I told Perry, I said, I don't need workmen in my house who I'm paying to do a job to moan and groan the entire time. You know what I mean? Where he's like, oh, God, putting these things up is hard. Like, this is... And then like one, I can see it. It's clearly crooked. Like we're going to have to redo it. I can see where a curtain bracket is clearly crooked. And when he did it, he was like, I think this one might be crooked. And I looked and I was like, it is crooked.
Yeah, in fact, it is.
Because if I can see it and I'm spatially so unaware, I was like, if I can see it, it totally is. And I was like, yeah, it's definitely crooked. And he's like, it's probably going to be okay. And I was like, no.
This isn't a volunteer gig.
That's it. I told Perry last night at dinner, I said, you're not my neighbor who I've like asked to come do this as a favor.
Yeah.
Like, I'm paying you
transaction
for your
is
time.
Yeah.
It's a transaction. Like, I'm not going to show up to a speaking event and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got to get up and speak on this stage. It's what you're being paid to do.
You made me thinking of this. Coming up.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my hard no right now.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
So,
all right. And then fashion trends. What do we need to wear in 2025? Or anything we need to get rid of? Like, what's happening in 2025?
I don't know, Courtney. It feels like the wild, wild west out there. It feels like, I don't know what, it keeps changing.
I know.
I used to be able to tell
this
you.
This week it's like what fits is what we're going with. Judy Blue. Have you seen those jeans?
Yes.
They're like a maternity version, but they have buttons. They're just so stretchy.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I feel like $1 million in these. And I'm just comfortable.
Listen, I've got these American Eagle wide leg sweatpants, and I called them, they're a generational sweatpant. Like they're so soft. They're like the perfect weight. I've worn them. It's like all I wear now. Like I have like 3 different pairs and I just put them on in the mornings, but they're wide legs. So they feel a little dressier than just like a sweatpant. Yeah.
But you like leave the house in them, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, I go everywhere in them. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just,
send the link. Send the link.
Yeah. They're so good.
All right. Last 2 lives selfishly have your time. Okay. I know that y'all shared this and I know it's in your Amazon shop, but the people that are all so pretty here in Texas tell me I really have to do a vitamin C serum and retinol. And I'm saying I'm going to do this, and then I buy some and I don't use it. But what's the go-to? Like not $1 million, something I can actually afford. What you got?
Listen, I have just switched to, I'm going to look it up. I think it's Eminence is what it's called. And my esthetician that I go to for my face, because I'm in my 50s now, so I have a face person.
Yeah.
It's called Eminence Vitamin C. I had been using the Revision, which is pricey, and I didn't feel like I was getting the bang for my buck on that deal. I do like the Eminence a lot. And then I bought this moisturizer called like Extreme Dream Cream or something like that. And it's so hydrating if you've got that dry, perimenopausal skin. But it gives you just kind of this glow under your makeup. I can't describe it, but I really like that. So, and then I have I always have a couple of other products on my to try list when I run out. So one that I've really been looking at is, I'm trying to find it in my notes. I know this feels really important.
Dream Cream. That sounds promising. That's good marketing.
Oh, the same company has something called Elastic Skin.
Yes, please.
And it's an anti-aging growth factor serum. I mean, here's the thing. I'm going to 100% get it. And it's only like $42. So it feels like if it does half of what it says,
I'm going to be watching you in the next few months to be like, she looks more or less.
Yeah.
Look like I'm jumping out of an airplane. That's tight. That's tight.
Yeah. That's what I need. That's what I need.
Okay, I would buy anything you wrote, Melanie. Like
You're so sweet.
Like memories of those early blog days. You were like you and Kelly Stamps and, like the people, then Sophie, just reading your blogs made me laugh out loud. And then every book you wrote, I was like on the beach with friends or, when do you read a book? But I would have yours and be laughing and then crying. And
so sweet.
You're so good. And you're so also from a marketing perspective, so I almost said freaking. I don't need to be cussing this morning, but so freaking so creative. And just even the cover art, that was back in the day where all the covers looked like Precious Moments or Straight Out of Lifeway. And I'm like, what is this girl? She's a Christian writer and she's able to have a cool cover. So creative. So tell us about the new book, baby.
So the new book is called Here Be Dragons, Treading the Waters. What is it? Treading the Deep Waters?
The deep waters of motherhood.
Deep waters of motherhood, mean girls, and generational trauma.
You got it.
So, just a lighthearted, feel-good book. I just finished recording the audio earlier this week. And I mean, when I left, like the sound engineer, poor Adam, gave me a hug when I left. He was like, man, he's like, this felt like a therapy session. And I was like,
did you sprinkle? I imagine you did sprinkle some funny stuff through it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's still, listen, I've got to come up for air. I can't stay in that, deep, heavy place all the time. And life is funny. I mean, and I think here's what I say, part of the gift of a dysfunctional childhood is it makes you funny. It just gives you dark humor.
That's survive.
Yeah.
Do a little tap dance here.
That's it. I got to laugh. So
here's the thing. There's so many people, and me included, we all have our stuff and we get annoyed with Instagram that it's all the highlight reel, but there's not very many times in your life you can talk about this stuff.
No.
And so I think many people are going, thank you, because my mom is still in my life or my dad is still alive or whatever. And I can't be honest about this. And then also I was really proud of you for being honest about Caroline's struggles, because I'm like, those girls are still alive. So how have you navigated being really, really truthful with some hard stuff in your life and just having the courage to just fight through it?
Yeah, it's really, I think that's really hard. I mean, it's like I open up this book with the Anne Lamott quote that is like, if people wanted you to write more warmly about them, they should have behaved better, which I totally believe.
Yeah.
But it is so tricky to navigate. I mean, first of all, I think with Caroline, thankfully, I have a daughter who is a hard Enneagram 8. And when I was like, are you okay with me telling this story? And of course, we've changed some names and details and things like that. But I was like, I mean, I'm not going to out people with their full name, even though I would like to.
Yeah.
But Jesus wouldn't do that. So I was like, are you okay with me? And she was like, tell it all. I don't care. Like if it helps other girls, if it serves any good, tell it all. I don't care.
It's amazing.
And so I love that. So that gave me a freedom there, because I was never going to tell anything that wasn't mine to tell from that. And I think that's the beauty of, Caroline's got her own book coming out where she talks about a lot of this stuff from her point of view.
Can't wait.
But mine is, this is my point of view. This is as a mom, nobody really prepares you for how hard it is to walk through those seasons with your daughter. I think in some ways it's harder than it was when it was you yourself, you know, because you're so powerless in it in a way. So that's that. And then, with my family stuff, and I don't want to give away too much with the book, but I had said that if I ever wrote this book, and I knew someday I would write this book, I had said that the title was going to be Now That Everybody Has Died. So
morbid, but so fair.
So I needed some key things to happen. I had kind of told the Lord, I will write this book, but here is the way life is going to need to look. And as it turns out, I signed this contract thinking that this was going to be one book, and life kind of took a turn where I was like, oh, this is that book. This is going to be that book.
Has your mom passed?
She has. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So tell us, I just think it's so interesting that through the process, and you'll share, we're going to talk about Mean Girls today. Then we're also going to talk about like our wounds and how we kind of dig into our own junk. But so you obviously knew that you had a dysfunctional childhood, but what was the unlocking? So Caroline, your daughter's struggling. She's going through a season. And then that kind of made you come alive to like, my gosh, I have some stuff to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, I think that my process had started long before that. You know, I think that there was a thing like of knowing. I always say that I feel like God really protects you almost till you leave your house, unless it's really messed up. I think whatever you grow up in, you just think, well, this is normal. This is the way everybody operates. And then I feel like college for me was the first time where you start to kind of go home with friends and you start to pay more attention to other dynamics. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't think that what I grew up in was normal. Like that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And so I think that process had started for me back in like my late teens, early 20s. But then I think when I found out I was pregnant with a daughter, all of a sudden you're like, oh, do I know how to navigate a healthy mother-daughter relationship? So that made me start to kind of process of like, where am I not healthy? Like, where do I need to get healthier? And then I think that went on through Caroline's childhood. But then I think when she hit her mean girl, all of that started happening in high school. You realize more than ever, like, I have to be emotionally and spiritually strong to be able to navigate her through this, because otherwise it's going to just be a big toxic soup, you know?
Yeah,
so,
which is really hard.
Yeah, it's really
it's
hard.
Almost like, I mean, we talk about this all the time on here, but it's almost like the Christian parenting thing. You're like, I want to be this spiritual leader and role model, but you're going through your own stuff spiritually. And you're like, I'm in a season of doubt, or I'm in a season where I'm not hearing from God. So let's back up to Mean Girls. Okay. So what is the difference between, like, I hear this all the time. Well, that's just girls being girls. And so I think even in the Christian culture, we sweep some behavior under the rug. And I want to say up front, both of my girls have been mean, and they have both had mean girls attack them. And so it's both. And I think after, you have two girls, or even the first, even like pre-K or like kindergarten, you're like, oh, my daughter might have done something too. So full disclaimer that both of us know our kids can be toots too. So how do you just not sweep it under the rug to be like, oh, that's just girls being girls? Because that's not kind.
No, it's not. And I think that that's so much of the problem is, I think as moms, and I was guilty of this too, and I say this, is I think as long as it's not your kid being targeted, you tend to just be like, it's all fine. And you're not paying attention to what's going on in the group unless it starts to affect your child in a negative way. And then you start to realize like, oh, this is bad. Like what's happening here? And I think you have to look at just the way that you're allowing, I think, to say girls are being girls, because I mean, I write about it. I had a mom say that exact same thing. And she was like, no, this is just girls being girls. And I'm like, no, your daughter sent my daughter a text saying, I'm going to blow up your life and tell whatever lies I have to tell to destroy you. You're like, that's not, in what world? I was like, is this a dystopian? Are we in the Hunger Games? Because this is not girls being girls. And I think that there has to be grace, and I think there has to be forgiveness because they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to have times that they're going to leave somebody out, or they're not going to invite somebody, or somebody's feelings are going to get hurt. Because that's part of the whole problem is we're dealing with these really emotionally immature kids who are learning. And the way you learn is you have to have an adult in your life saying, that is not kind. That is not the way you treat people.
Right.
You've got to keep, shepherding them back to where they need to be. That's our job as moms, is we lead the way by saying, this is what it looks like to be kind and loyal and honest with a friend, but we have to show them that, because they don't know that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the ages can be tricky. So I think, if I'm correct, when Caroline was high school, was that when this really came to a head? All right. So back up to like elementary, even like those early years, those are the years when you can step in. You're like, well, then that girl's not invited over, or that we're going to talk to the teacher and have them separate tables if they're fighting all day. And then as they get older, so talk to the mom right now that's like, I don't know if I should step in, because there's extremes on like always stepping in and handling it for them and being like this hovering, way too involved mom. Then there's the other extreme with like not caring at all. And both are dangerous. And so how do you know? That's a big question, but like, age appropriate, when do I step in? And then just balancing that, like, when do you go in that fierce protective mode and say, no, I'm getting involved in this?
Hi, I'm Patricia Heaton, and I'm thrilled to tell you about a film that will touch your heart and inspire your faith, The Unbreakable Boy. This is a story of hope, joy, and God's unshakable presence in our lives, even in the hardest times. Austin's incredible spirit and his family's journey of faith will remind you to cherish life's blessings, big and small. As parents raising the next generation, you'll see how love, gratitude, and courage can transform even the toughest challenges. Don't miss The Unbreakable Boy. It's the perfect movie for the entire family. Learn more at theunbreakable.movie.
Child who struggles with a specific subject, or do you have a child who's ahead and not getting challenged enough in the classroom? For either of those kids and anyone in between, you should go check out IXL Learning. IXL Learning is an online learning program that enriches your homeschool curriculum and your child's classroom learning. It offers practice in math, English, language arts, science, and social studies while adapting to each child, meeting them exactly where they are. Plus, IXL encourages students to be curious and empowers them to choose how to learn. And the best part is, IXL is so easy for parents. One site gets you all you need, and IXL customizes learning for each child and their needs. Everything on IXL is organized by grade, subject, topic, and subtopic, making it simple to find activities for the exact skills you are covering. And IXL offers instant feedback and explanations of new topics as kids use the program. So you can feel confident that your kids will gain an understanding of the skills they are learning. Make an impact on your child's learning by getting IXL now. And Pardon the Mess listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/today. Visit IXL.com/today to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
I mean, I think that to me, what I tried to do, and I didn't do it perfectly, but I think the goal is you really want to equip them to be able to handle it on their own. I think if we're always stepping in, we're not teaching them, hey, here's how you navigate a hard relationship. Here's how you have tough conversations. Here's how you're honest with a friend. Like, they have to have those coping skills. And I think that this is all part of that process. And so I think it depends on the kid, because Caroline for a long time was like, I've got it. Like, I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. And even when she was coming home from school and was so upset and crying, and it just felt like it had been going on forever, she was just like, I've got it. I can handle it. I can handle it. And it finally got to a point where we watched her, Perry and I, my husband, watched her just kind of become this, like, we started to recognize, we were like, she's kind of becoming a shell of herself. Like, it just felt like there was no joy.
Wow.
And that's when we were like, and I had been praying, like, God, do we move schools? Do we, what do we do? And so I felt like God just kept saying, be still, just trust me. Because the thing is I think our knee jerk is we're going to like get you out of this environment. But
that's right.
But that's not a solution either necessarily. And so, but there was a day very specifically, and we had been praying for wisdom, where Perry was like, we're done. Like, we're stepping in. And he basically told her, like, this is war. He's like, if they follow you in the bathroom again, he said, if it gets physical, you punch them in the face. We'll meet you in the office. We're done. Like, and it was time. It was time we had done all the things. And at that point, it gave her the freedom and it ended up going to the school administrators, because it had just gotten to the point where it was relentless.
Wow.
And it was beyond what was normal to me.
Which is so disappointing. Whereas your heart breaking, I can imagine to be like, this is not what I envisioned for my daughter. And you're a great friend to people. And she's adorable. It's like, this is not fair. I mean, I imagine there was some sadness around that.
It was devastating. I mean, I say in the book, I'm like, during the time, I mean, you know how it is as a mom, when you're watching your kid go through something awful and hard. I mean, you're just a shell of yourself. You know, I functioned like a normal person, and I would get up and do all my stuff and, drive her to school with a smile on my face, like, it's going to be a great day. And you're just like, it's not going to be a great day. No. Like, it is not.
So I can't wait to read her book and hear her side of the story, because I think as I'm getting older, my girls are like, Mom, I love that you think you have all this wisdom. Like, they want to hear from her. They want to hear from a girl that's like, I was just in this. And I feel like they'll listen. Yay for that. Okay, one thing I was thinking, hold on, I had a thought, ADD, bring it back. Okay, so one of the things I realized that was helpful to me, and I don't know if you agree with this, but if my girls were having some drama, I had some trusted friends. One of mine, thankfully, was a 5th grade teacher and had a pulse on what was going on. And I would call them and say, you can tell me, like, what is the full story here?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? Because I think our assumption is to believe everything our kids say. And at Lisa Turkhurst would say, is it a pattern or mistake? Every kid's going to make a mistake here or there. But if it's a pattern of relentless behavior, and I wanted to know, for one of my groups of friends are really hard for her. And I've known since 5th grade. And I had a friend be able to say, because she was their teacher, say, hey, I watch her on the playground. She's amazing one-on-one. Something happens when it gets in groups and she walks away. I'm like, that's her own stuff to go like, I don't function well in groups. So but I think that's one of the tips I would give people is like, do you have a trusted friend or someone that can like not be so emotionally invested to be like, this is what, she's being mistreated, but this is also what's going on. Did you have that person in your life, or is high school kind of tricky for that?
I mean, I think high school is trickier because they're kind of on their own. But I did know from her coaches, from her teachers, Perry was on the school board during those years. So it feels like you're always going to hear about any bad behavior that your daughter exhibits in that kind of a public setting. But I knew her and the people that knew her, and there was too much. I think I looked around and I was like, no, there's too much other fruit in her life. And the thing about Caroline is she's a relentless truth teller. So when she screws up, she's the first to be like, yeah, I said that. I shouldn't have said that. Like, she's just not a kid who really lies. I mean, because that's just not who she is. And I'm not saying that as a pie in the sky. Like, she's brutally honest, whether you want her to be or not. And I could look and see where her personality. Now, I could see where her personality, because she is a hard Enneagram 8, and she's going to just come forward and she's going to go at something straight at it, and she's going to tell you what she really thinks. And I've said, those are not really personality traits that lend themselves to success in the high school economy. You know what I mean? Like, that's
great in your first job.
Yeah, like they're great when you're doing a lot of things and they will serve her so well in life. But I think in high school, so much of playing that game is like to keep it quiet and don't say what you think and don't anger it and just play along. And that's just not who she is at all. And so I could see why, because she kept like going to these girls and being like, can we just talk? Like, can we just talk this out? Like, what happened? Like, can we just have an honest conversation? And she was like, they won't even talk to me. Like, they won't even.
Terrible.
And so you realize it's really, and what I kept telling her is, I was like, ultimately, I know this feels like it's about you, but it's really not even about you. I was like, this is that need for like drama and excitement, and we're going to have a common enemy, and you just happened, it's your unlucky day right now.
That's right. That's right. I also think groups are interesting, and I had some conversations with one of mine early on when I could see a group forming. I don't know if you've read that book, Queen Bees and Wannabes.
Yes.
It's like a
Yeah.
And you can see all that playing out, that like there's a different hierarchy. And I could see one of mine gravitating towards this mean girl group. And I was like, I could see the writing on the wall. And so as parents of little ones, another thing I would tell you is just like, pay attention, have people over. And you said something so important. It's like when you watched your child be different. And so I could tell even in the early play dates, like who they were themselves around, who they were not themselves around, who they were pretending and trying to be somebody they weren't. And so just start paying attention. And I always say, or Andy Stanley says, dial in, dial out. It's like, who are we dialing into their lives and who are we kindly
so true.
Out, you know? All right. What do you think you needed as a little girl from your mom that you wanted to provide for Caroline?
Oh, man. I think really just the ability to be, I think my mom, because of a combination of, I think she was bipolar. I think she had a lot of personality disorders. I mean, there was a lot of mental illness there at a time when people didn't, I mean, this was the 80s. Nobody talked about mental illness. That wasn't a thing. So I think she self-medicated a lot. So I think what I needed was stability. I think I needed to feel like my whole self was welcome there. And that I didn't have to keep down parts of myself that she didn't like or that didn't make her feel comfortable. I learned, and I still, I mean, part of me is like, am I really a people pleaser? Is it nature versus nurture? Because like my inclination is still like, just make everybody happy. Let's keep everybody happy. Don't. Because I just learned early on that if I voiced any kind of dissent or any kind of frustration or whatever, it was immediately shut down with like, usually a sarcastic, like, oh, your life is so hard. And I thought, I never wanted Caroline. I always wanted her to know, like, your whole self is welcome here. And I love you for exactly who you are and exactly who God created you to be. And you don't need to be anything for me. And you are not in charge of my emotional health. Like, you are not in charge of my moods. Like, I'm my own grown-up person, so I'm not going to let you. And listen, that can be hard because sometimes
Very.
when they have a bad day, and I mean, it's hard to not get on that roller coaster with them. But I had actually, my therapist made this comment to me and I was like, this is so smart. And she was like, you need to look at it like you've put her on a roller coaster and you're not on it with her, but you're looking at her from the bottom going like, okay, it's going to be a little scary, but you're going to do great. Like it's going to be great. And so it's like,
it's so hard.
Just to remove yourself just a little bit, because I think as moms, especially with our girls, I think it's so hard because we remember, because we were girls, we remember all those unique feelings of being left out, of feeling lonely, of having our heart broken, of having a group of girls turn on us. I mean, it's so fresh. And so it's so hard to not get wrapped up in all of that with them because we remember exactly how it felt.
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Yeah.
So
give me advice. I know there's moms like me. I'm a chronic fixer. So like they hurt and I just want to jump in. And even now, she's 18 and I'm like trying to solve stuff. And I'm like, oh. So lately she's been wanting to be really honest with me about some things. And instead of like my knee jerk is to be like, well, that's not kind.
Yeah.
Like that you're thinking that. And I'm like, that's not helpful to her. And so as they're little, you're trying to redirect and show them like, hey, that behavior or that thinking, like think about it. So you're teaching, you're training, but now she's 18 and I'm like, I need to be confident enough that she knows Jesus, she knows who she is, and she can be comfortable with me to say, this is how I'm feeling without me going like, okay, step 1, call them back. Step 2, change your attitude. Because she just wants me to go like, that's really hard. Like that's what she wants me to say is that's really hard. I'm sorry you're having to go through that. So give me counsel and us moms that our knee jerk is to just fix and redirect, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think at some point, and it's so, listen, the urge to fix, that's a real thing. I mean, the amount of nights that I lay up awake and think, here's how I can fix this problem. We could do this, we could do this, we could do that. But you start to realize, and Caroline's 21 now, like once they're off at school, they're going to have to know how to fix all this stuff for themselves. They're going to have to know how to navigate it for themselves. And so we're equipping. And so I think, during the 18 years they're under your roof, I think you can coach them. But I do think you have to listen. And a lot of times what I've learned with Caroline that is really helpful is in the moment, I just listen. Like when she's wanting to tell me about a situation or to be like totally honest, I just soak it up. And I just make myself say, Kelly Corrigan, an author who I love, she wrote a book called Tell Me More. Yeah. Where you kind of go for that posture of like, tell me more.
Yeah. It's good.
Because the thing is, as a mom, the minute you step in and say, well, what you should have done or what you need to do is, I feel like then they shut down.
That's right.
And if you'll just listen, then they're going to tell you the whole thing. And then what I do is I kind of, store it in my mind. And then I wait like 2 days, 3 days later.
What is that kind of Holy Spirit give and get to wait?
It is listen, and I've learned too, here's another pro parenting tip. If I would sit when Caroline would come home, like late at night after being out with friends, if I would sit and pretend to be just like playing a game on my phone and not make eye contact with her, because you also can't act too, like I'm interested, I'm listening, but I'm also just letting you, because if I start to be too engaged, like who did what, then she's like,
oh my gosh, this is so true. Poker face.
Yeah. So you just have to listen and go, oh, okay.
Oh, cool.
That's so, okay. So then what happened? And you just kind of let it go. And then I kind of think of the things I want to say. And it's really good for me too, because I don't knee jerk on, I'm not going to get stuck on like who got drunk, but instead I go back and say, so do you think that was a good decision when da-da-da-da-da?
Yeah,
and
questions.
And 2 or 3 days later, she's so much more open to it.
That's right.
Because it's not in the moment of me telling or her telling me something. It's like I can process, okay, what's important for me to be able to tell her about that situation. And I kind of sit on it. But that is a Holy Spirit activity.
That's right. Have you seen that meme or whatever with Tina Fey? And she's talking to Jimmy Fallon. And she's like, having teenagers is like, I think she said something like, dealing with an ex-boyfriend where you're like, do you want me to come? No, I'll stay here. I'm like, oh, you want to talk to me? Like, I'm not even close to it. It's funny. But
so, yeah. Do you want to go to dinner? I mean, if you don't, it's totally fine.
Exactly,
but if you want to, you got to play it so cool. You got to play it so cool.
Okay, let's talk mom wounds. So talk to the mom that's like, I am realizing that, like you said, my home was not ideal. And you're like, please give all the parents grace because we're realizing it's really hard. But where do they even start? Is it straight to therapy? Is this an ongoing conversation with God? How do you start digging through what you went through and healing stuff? Because that's hard to face that stuff.
Yeah, it is hard to face that stuff. I think it's so unique to every person. It's like, what do you need? Like, and how deep are those wounds? And do you find yourself operating out of those wounds? Like that to me, because we're all going to have things like, and I think that's the whole, even when I was writing this book, I was like, there are people that had far worse childhoods than I had.
Yeah.
But it's all relative to what you've experienced and the way it's shaped you as you've, grown up and developed your own life. So it's like, what do you need to heal? Like, is this a matter of that you just need to create some boundaries? Because sometimes I think as grownups, we have the freedom to create boundaries that we weren't able to when we were younger. But then you start to feel like, but is this person constantly pushing up against those boundaries? Can I hold those boundaries? And then you start to look and go, can Jesus and I heal whatever this is in me that has felt broken and damaged? And then sometimes, I think there comes a time. I say writing this book is the thing that finally sent me to therapy, because I think getting it all out was just like, man, there are still some things I just need to process and walk through a little bit in this. Because I think healing is it's an ongoing, it's not a destination. I think it's an ongoing process.
Because the thing is, like, you wouldn't be you without her being your mom. But it's like, almost, I don't know half the words, you probably said it beautifully in the book, but it's like, can your past inform you, but not completely gripped or run? Like, you not, like you said, operate out of it to go like, yeah, that was my past. I didn't realize how jacked up that was. I didn't realize that now I have a tendency to keep the peace or whatever. Yeah. So is that some of it detaching from like, that was my story and it's still part of my story, but this is not going to like drive the train or whatever the analogy is.
And I think you look at it like, where are the parts? What am I wanting God to redeem in my story? Like where are the places that felt broken where I need him to restore? And like for me, the full circle redemption is getting to be the mom to Caroline that I wish I'd had.
Wow.
That's a beautiful full circle thing. And it doesn't take away the fact that I didn't have that mom. Yeah. But there's something healing. And I think it's made me so intentional in my relationship with Caroline, maybe in ways I wouldn't have been I hadn't have been through what I'd been through. And I think that that's the same, circling back to our kids, it's the same thing. It's like, they are going to go through hard stuff. We all do. But it's like, trust the way that God is wanting to use those things to like shape them and to give them grit and resilience, because having that background made me tough in ways that I wouldn't have been otherwise. And it shaped my faith in ways that it wouldn't have been shaped otherwise. And I think sometimes we want to protect our kids out of their testimony, and God's like, no, this is part of their story. You got to let it happen.
And I love that he's used the word generational, and that's biblical too. But it's like, we could look at it as like, oh, I've been dealt all this stuff, which is hard. Yeah. But like, oh my gosh, we get to change the story for our kids. Like we get like, think about the mom that Caroline's going to be. And we want that. We want every generation to get a little bit stronger and healthier than the past one, which is
that's it.
So exciting. All right. I know in your book you talk about, I believe, or maybe I just read this, but you talk about a laurel. I love a good image. Like talk to the parents that are like in the thick of it. And they're like, am I messing them up for life? Will all these mistakes just be the end of me? Like, you can just feel so discouraged that I'm the reason everyone's struggling or they're going through this rough patch. So how can we take a long-term lens and just realize that more is going on in the story and it's going to be okay?
That's, I talk about in the book, there's a whole thing where in the spring in San Antonio, there's these mountain laurel trees that bloom, and they bloom for like 2 days in March, and they're beautiful. Like they have these beautiful purple blooms. They smell like grape soda. Like they do. I love to walk the neighborhood when they're blooming because it smells good and they're beautiful. But we have 2 of those trees in our yard. And one of our trees, for whatever reason, and my husband's a landscaper, so go figure. It wouldn't bloom. Like it just would not bloom. And I would feel angry about it. Like I would be like, seriously, like why will this tree not bloom? And Perry fertilized it. We had somebody come in and excavate part of the roots so they could get more light.
You had one job, Perry.
Yes, we had done all the things to try to make this tree bloom, and it just wouldn't. And I would walk around and I would look at everybody else's trees, and I'd be like, well, look at their trees. I bet Bill doesn't even water his trees, and his trees are over there, looking great. And so, but then one day, this was about 2 years ago, I was walking the dogs and I came around the corner and I looked up, and that tree that had not bloomed in probably 5 years was like covered in blooms. And in that moment, it was like God just said to me, like, you thought nothing was happening, but all these things were happening. Like all the fertilizing, all the treating the roots, all the different things, all the sunlight, all the time. It just took time. Like that tree just took a little longer to bloom. And And it was just things because I thought social media and all of that, we look around at everybody else's trees all the time. Like we're always like, well, their tree, look how good their tree looks. That looks so good. It's blooming, whatever. And nothing is happening here. Like it just feels desolate and barren and pointless. And what am I doing? But I think it's the reminder to me that God is always doing 10 things below the surface of what we can see. And sometimes we only see 2 of them until it all turns. And then you're like, well, look at all these pieces he was putting together all this time. But sometimes it's the waiting, and the waiting is hard. We don't like waiting. I want to pray, and I want to have an instant answer tomorrow about it.
Absolutely. Gosh, it's so good. All right, I want to read this quote as we end. Let's see. It says, and I'm sure I pulled it from your press materials, but I just really liked it. It says, when we achieve healing and wholeness in him, there's no dragon we can't slay and no parenting battle we won't call victory. And so as you end, just remind us that there's a God that loves our kids and us, and he can do things. Because I think it's both. Like I use this analogy a lot, but it's like, say Caroline was like, hey, Mom, I'm going to go to nurse. I want to be a nurse. And you're like, great. Let's just pray about it. It's like, no, you have to go to school. Yeah. You have to like get some practicum hours. You know what I mean? So remind us that it's both. Like we can step in and love and be present, but God can also do things that we can't even imagine.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole key of parenting is like trusting and knowing. And listen, I'm still walking this out, and I have a 21-year-old who's about to graduate from college, but it's trusting that number one, God loves them and knows them better than we do. And I think that's hard to remember because we love them so much and we know them so well. But God sees all the pieces and parts of them, and he knows who they are now. He knows who they're going to be. He knows what he's making them into. And it's like, trust him that he's going to use even this last year for Caroline has been really hard in a lot of ways. But I look, and I told her this a couple of days ago. I said, when I look at what God has done in your heart and in your life over the past 12 months, like, I really can't be sad about all the things that got you to this point.
That's good.
Because he was number one, he was rescuing you from places you didn't need to be and things where that weren't going to fit you. And number two, you've trusted him enough to move you into those places where he is going to use you and where he's equipped you. And as a parent, sometimes it's hard to watch that process because we're watching them struggle. I read this thing the other day, and it was like the way like one of those huge emperor moths like is in a cocoon and that they fight their way out. And it was a story about somebody saw that and they like decided to cut open the cocoon to like save the moth, the struggle. But the struggle is how their wings get strong enough to fly.
Wow.
And I was like, man, that's it with our kids. Like our tendency is we want to go in and cut that cocoon and, make it easier. And we don't want to watch them wrestle, but God's going, no, this is the very thing that is going to shape them. And if you spare them this struggle, they're not going to be strong enough to get through because life's going to be hard. You're always going to have dragons. I mean, I'm 53 and I'm still fighting dragons. It's just life.
I feel like your next parenting book needs a moth involved.
A moth. Yes, a big moth on the cover. Good. People would be like, is that a parenting book or Silence of the Lambs? What?
A little of both. Hey, I love you. I'm so excited for you. And when you came to speak and you and Sophie came to Compass, it was like a freak out. I mean, is that just weird to you? Like people are like, Big and Boob are coming, like hundreds of women, like, and I think you're real, you're honest, you're hilarious. Like, I don't know, y'all just have a special thing going on. And I'm so glad you're still doing it.
Me too. Listen, what a gift. I mean, when I look like that, I get to do that with one of my best friends, like, I don't know, just what a gift. But yeah, it feels very surreal. I'm just like how is this life? But man, it's fun.
I love it. Keep it going.
Thanks, Courtney.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pardon the Mess. As always, we've got more encouragement and resources over at christianparenting.org. And you can also stay connected with us on social media at Pardon the Mess. And if you like this episode, I'd love for you to do two things. Press follow on whatever podcast platform you love, and also be sure to leave a rating so other parents can find us. Remember, you're never alone in this beautiful mess of parenting.
Oh, Mrs. Garcia, how do you balance it all? You're a school counselor and new homeowner, a mother of two, and grad student. You're an ander. At National University, we see the whole you. That's why we're dedicated to your professional growth, through faculty mentorships and career support, so you can focus on what matters most. National University, supporting the whole you. Learn more at nu.edu.